Howdy folks, this is Justro at Metcalf Mills. You see this barn up here behind me? Well, that one's real special to me. That was my grandpa's barn. And I growed up here just across the road and spent a lot of time around this place. And I wanted to show you how it is and how it was and tell you everything I can about it. I hope you enjoy it. Now there used to be a fence that run, there's a gate right here you had to go through, had a chain that hooked over a nail, and the gate was right there to go into the barnyard, and there's a fence went all the way across through here and out through the edge of the yard and down. And there's a big old grapevine. Pa had a grapevine. It went from his smokehouse over there on the other side of the house. That smokehouse right there, you can see behind the house. That grapevines went from there all the way through here, down the front of this little crib shed, all the way down to that crow egg apple tree right there. He had grapevines trellised all the way around this place. And this right here was his little feed room that he kept his feed barrels in. You can see right in there, them barrels down there. And this up here was his wood shed. You went in right here. That's where he kept all of his stove wood. I've busted many a stick of stove wood in this little crib shed. See back here at the back, see that hen nest right there? One day I was over here, every evening I'd come over here and gather the eggs when I was a little boy, and on this nest right here I'd have to climb up the side of that crib and reach my hand over in there and feel around to get the eggs. Well, one day I reached over in there and got a hold of something and pulled it up, and it was a big old black snake. He was in there eating eggs, and just so happened, I guess he had an egg in his mouth and he couldn't bite me, but I pulled that black snake up out there and I seen what it was, and boy, I jumped down from there and run all the way to the house. Scared me to death. I wasn't probably maybe 5 years old. Boy, I tell you, that scared me good. I remember one time when I was pretty young, Pa was in here when he was still able, getting him some stove wood. And I was bad to sneak around when I was a little boy, you know, just slipping around, and I slipped in there and I eased up in that crib over there and climb up. That was his corn crib there too behind, you can see. And I eased up there and climb up on that real quiet, and he didn't see me, and I started going meow, meow, making a little noise, and he'd look, and it took him a while to figure out who it was and what I was doing. He got a good laugh out of that. But that's his old crib shed where he kept his corn at one time, and then after corn, he kept his stove wood in here busted up in the dry. Now this, right there in that spot, under that nest, is where that old corn mill that I rebuilt when I was 15 years old, it sat right there for probably close to 50 years. It sat right there in that spot. I wanted to tell you something else too. Over here in these back sheds, over here behind, that's where he'd milk his cow. And in the evening when I'd come over here, I'd always come over here first thing in the evening when I got off of the school bus or whatever. I'd come over here and I'd come walking up through here. There's a path from my back kitchen porch door right there up through here to the barn gate. And I'd usually meet Pa coming about right here with a bucket full of milk. And he'd hold that bucket up and let me drink out of it standing right there. I'd drink that warm milk that he'd just milked from the cow. Tickle him to death. He'd laugh. And right here, his barn is just a pole barn. 2-story pole barn with backer tiers in the top to hang backer. And right here, he had a little opening right here for his chickens. They could go up under the shop floor. He had a little shop right there where that window is. And he had it fixed so his chickens could go, they could get up and under there away from anything in the shade and have a little place. Chickens like a place like that where they can get up and hide and kind of have time to themselves. But he put these locust posts in here, or locust, big old locust logs, poles, cemented around them there, and they run all the way up to the top. And I remember them talking. Paul said his brother Elmer helped him build this barn. And the way they build it, they didn't build no scaffold out here. They put the lumber on from inside the barn. They'd just reach out and nail it on from inside the barn. That's how they put it on. They might have had to get the ladder out to put the last boards on the top, but about all this lumber they put on from the inside of the barn as they went up. And right here, he had a stall or a stable right in there that he could feed his cows. They'd go in there, and he had it fixed so he could feed them. And I don't know what he done with this little room back up here. It's just kind of a back barn room. He might have, I don't know if they worked back or in there at one time. I think that's what they done. I think that was a back casing house. It's one of them back hallways to have a warm place to work back or when it's cold outside. You can see here how he done that. You see how the earth's where it was at when he built it up around that cement and where it's at now. But the whole barn is leaning down the hill because of that erosion and, you know, getting wore down and over time and everything pulling on it. But everything's leaning down the hill. Right here, he had another shop window on this side. And them cutouts right there, he had put that for his chickens. He had roost poles that run through there in that spot I showed you over there, that little door where the chickens got in. I'd forgot about that, but he had roost poles he put right there for his chickens to roost on, up and under there to stay away from everything, not get eat up of a night. Windows up here for the casing house. And over here is where he had his hog pen. That was his hog pen right here. He had it fixed so they could come out there and that overflow from the spring come down through there and they could get out there in the mud and cool off and had a place to lay out there. That's where he raised his hogs, raised 2 a year. Right in here is the door into the shop. I'm gonna go around and come in from the other side, but right there's the door into his shop. He had these 2 big old doors right here he could open up to get under the bottom of the barn. But you can see how it's leaning down the hill. Now right here, that rock right there, right below that rock across there, see that board laying right across there? That's where he kept his honeybees. He kept them sitting right in front of that rock, his honeybee gums. That's where he kept them. And right up there, that's his reservoir. I think it's made out of cement blocks. That's a reservoir from the spring. And that's where furnished water for all of our houses, 3 houses. Here you can see the house pretty good. Got chestnut trees over here. See them chestnut burrs on them trees? And his smokehouse, what's left of it. And he had a shed on that lower side right there off of that smokehouse where he'd back his truck up under there. And right over there, right there in that spot, he had another shed, and that's where he had his lassie furnace to make cook sorghum lasses over there. And he worked up at Lewis's Memorial Park. If you watched that video, I talked about that. And old Lewis was building rock walls up there, and he give Pa these rocks. Must have been some they had left over, and Pa hauled them from out there at Beaver Dam at Asheville out here, and had him a fireplace built out of them. Gray granite rock. And this house here, the middle part right there, that center ridge across there, that is the main part of the house. He added this back kitchen and porch and bathroom on. It was just a little old 4-room house when they moved here in the 50s. But right here, I'll show you how Paul had this fixed. This down here was where he had his stable. His cattle could come in there and he could feed them here. Feed them from up here on this high side. And then close the door on them if he wanted to. Feed them. He had a manger built across right here that they could eat out of. And right here is that little room. I don't know if this here's a casing house or not. I don't think it was. I think this might have been a room here, dugout room. I think there's a door on it at one time. He might have kept taters or something. He kept taters down there under the house in his basement, but I don't know exactly what he kept right here. I don't remember nobody saying, but the casing house is over on the other side of that wall. And right here you can see he put these little braces up here to hang his gears on. There's his bridles for his horses he had. There's where he'd hang his gears. Here's his collars for his mules or his horses. There's an old saddle hanging there he's hung up. Old chair. Now this right here I'll show you. Here's some more nesting boxes. This is where his chickens get up here and lay eggs. In these nest boxes, he kept hay in there and they'd fly up. No dogs couldn't get to the eggs or nothing. You didn't have to worry about nothing but snakes. And right here, this is a yoke right here. Now what they'd do with this is they would put it up under the cow's neck, like that. Put it up under the cow's neck, and you can see that notch right here cut in it. See that notch? They'd tie a piece of leather around that and run it across and tie it off over here on this side, and it'd hang on the cow's neck. And what that would do is when the cow got up trying to go through the fence and get out, that'd keep her from getting out, see? Because she'd stick her head through and that would catch on the fence down here at the bottom, and up here at the top she couldn't go through, see? That's what that's for. Right here, this ring, he could tie his horse or mules up while he was putting the gears on them. Now right here, I want to show you. This right here is his sled. And the bottom runner's rotted off of it now. But this here is his sled that he used with his horses and mules. And what he'd do is he'd hook his stock out here to the front of this. It's up on its side right now. They usually get a sassafras runner that's curved and make a sled runner, and then they'd put a half sole on it. They'd half sole it here. I guess a half moccasin's what they call it, half sole it. And this would run on the ground, see, and it wouldn't wear out their sled runner. So when these half soles wore out, they'd just pull them off and put new ones on there, see? And it kept it from wearing their sled runner out. Now these farm sleds, they hauled everything on these. I mean, they hauled backer in on them. They hauled hay on them. They hauled everything on these farm sleds like this. And that's the runner there that would run on the ground. It's tilted up on its side. Down here's the bottom runner, and it's rotted off laying down on the ground there. But that's Pa's sled that he hauled everything on. With his horses and mules. He had mules when I got to be big enough to know anything about it. Now right here's his casing house. Back in here, they'd get in here and work backer when it was cold. And you can see these braces back here on the wall and that plank right there. That's where they'd lay their backer and maybe stalks. I don't know exactly what they use what for, but they'd lay them on there when they was working backer and handing it, pulling it off. And you can see back there, Pa was painted his name there. J. Metcalf, 1975. That ain't when he built this barn, I don't think. I think they built it before that. I could be wrong though, but I think he built it before that. But you can see how, maybe you can see how this is a leaning here. It's really leaning down the hill. But that's the casing house where he worked his backer. A little old button latch here to latch a door, see? This is how they made a lot of them little button latches. They'd just take their pocket knife and trim the corners off and make it look decorative. It looked neat how they done it. See that? Just something simple, but it looked neat. It wasn't just a plain old button latch like that. They took a little time and made it look neat. Had a door here, he could close it up. And right here's the old shop door I showed you from outside a minute ago. It's kind of all thrown around right now, but this is his shop. He always had all kinds of tools and everything in here. And right there on that bench, that's where his anvil sat, right there. Wasn't really a blacksmith shop, it's just a shop to work in. He never did, to my knowledge, have a coal forge or nothing to heat metal, but he had his post vise bolted right there where them two bolt holes is. And then right there he had his anvil sitting right beside of it. And you know, he had a grinder on that board sticking out right here, a bench grinder. You could sharpen lawnmower blades and do pretty much whatever you needed to in here. Right here's an old saddle now. Thing's got wooden stirrups. Look at there how they bent that wood around there. They scored it there with a handsaw, and that made it to where they could bend it, see? Old saddle, man. But we'd come in here when I was a little boy, and we'd play and mess around, mess with things we shouldn't have, and start Pa's grinder and grind metal, and just being boys, me and my cousin. Old lock he had on there at one time. And he'd back trucks in here. They're oak, so they held it up. Well, I say they held it up, but look here what he done. I forgot about this. He put locusts in here, right where he's going to be backing his truck or trailer in to unload backer. He put them locusts in here all the way across to this middle beam here and set them on top of these posts. See that locust right there? Yep, and that held her up. Held the weight when he's backing a heavy trailer in. Now right here, you can see right here, a door right here. He had that right there is part of an old ladder he had right here that he could open that door and put hay down here to feed his animals. And here's a ladder you could also climb up to go up in the loft right here. Now, if anybody ever asks you, do you know what a doodle bug is? You can say, why, sure I know what a doodle bug is. Old Justro showed me one up there at Chestnut Mountain one day. Now, looking down here, I wanted to show you something. Do you know what a doodle bug is? Do you know what a doodle bug is? You see all these little old holes in the ground? Looks like a funnel. See them everywhere? That's doodle bug holes. That's doodle bug traps. And I'm going to show you what them is on another video coming up real soon. You're going to enjoy that. We'll have some fun with these doodle bugs. Go back around up here. I think this door's locked. We may not get to see the inside of the barn loft, but I think it's pretty full anyway, so. Yeah, it's locked up. See if we can peek in here. You can see it's tier poles where Pa hung his backer up here. And then just a bunch of storage for things in there. I think it was 1, 2. Let's see, 1. Yeah, it's just a 2-tier high. 1 tier through the hall and 2 tiers on each side. Used to be some backer Pa had hanging. See if we can see it. No, I don't see it now, but just a while back. Yeah, there it is. See that backer hanging right back there? I can't get it, but so good. But you can see It's a hanging there on the backer stick, and that's the last crop of backer my grandpa growed. He left a little bit of it hanging there. Just a habit, I reckon. Some more of it down lower right there. And when they'd open a bale of hay, they'd always throw their hay strings up over a pole there, up over one of the tier poles, and that's strings that they cut off a bale of hay when they was feeding. And they'd use them for whatever they needed all through time. Needed a good hay string, they'd come and get them one. I can tell you one thing. When my grandpa was healthy, he had all this fenced. And all this was clean fields. Daddy's brother, my uncle, he's cleaned up a lot of it, but it was clean, grassy fields, the prettiest fields you ever seen. All this was. All that hillside over there, pretty clean, grassy fields. Cattle and chickens grazing it. But you see what a little bit of time and what nature does, it takes right back over. We might make a mark for a little while, but it won't last long. I remember Pa had a pen right here, like for chickens or something, wired in with hardware cloth. And he'd keep some birds in there if he wanted to separate some. And he had one down here on this other side, a little skinny one right there, that he could keep birds in. And I wanted to show you one more thing down here. Just a little detail that nobody'd ever know unless they knowed. Right down here in what was the barnyard, this rock right here, it's pretty special, and I'll tell you why. Because right here, and on this groovy part right here, see, that's where Pa would salt his cattle. You had to salt cattle, give them minerals. They'd lick that salt and get their minerals. And that's where he'd salt his cattle, right here on this rock. They'd stand here and lick that salt. And the gate was right there. The gate was hinged on this corner post and swung open and had a chain that you put on a nail in the top of the gate post, and that chain off of the gate, he'd hook it right on the nail to keep anything from opening it. You come through here, and there's something like a little place in these rocks right here. I don't know if you can see it. See that rock right there? And rocks right here. It's like a little natural step you walk through right there to go up into the barnyard. But that's about it for what we can see right here. And what I can tell you over here, he had another spring right here. That piece of metal covers the opening, but there's a spring down in there. And he had an overflow pipe right there for that spring. And I remember in the summertime, he'd get a watermelon and he'd lay it. I can't show you. He'd lay it right under that little spout right there where that water, it was an overflow spout for the spring. It come down and the pipe turned up about 2 foot and went over, and you could fill a bucket up there, whatever you need to do, but he'd lay a watermelon under there to cool it off under that overflow of that spring there. Old times, boy, I tell you what. Old times. I wanted to show you over here down below the barn. These stalls right here is where he'd do his milking. He'd milk his cows in here. I wanted to show you that. He had 3 stalls. One was down there, it's caved in. Another right here and another right here. And over here, this was an old crib they moved here from somewhere. I think Daddy moved it here if I remember right. But over here, you go out through here, this is the way you drive into the barn. They had a ford in the creek right there. It's gone now, but they had a ford in the creek there, and the creek was shallower, you could drive across. And on up there, the old dirt road went up through here. And he had bars over there, wooden bars. He built a thing that looked like a little ladder. And he had 4 or 5 poplar pole bars. He had one of them little ladders on each side. And them bars just laid in them little ladders across there. And when you'd have to drive through there, you'd have to get out and take the bars down. And you'd just slide them through one side and get them out of the way and drive through and get out and go up there and slide each one of them back through and lay them up. And that is taking the bars down and putting the bars up. I wish I had a picture to show you. I wanted to give a special holler out and thank you to my uncle, Dad's brother, Steve, for letting us walk around and look around over at the old place. I appreciate that very much. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed looking at my grandpa's barn and around his barnyard and his place there. Grandma died in 2009. And Pa died in 2010, and the house has pretty much been empty since then. And boy, I sure do miss them. I didn't have grandparents on Mama's side. They was gone before I got here, but I was blessed with my grandparents on Daddy's side to live just right across the road from us, and I got to spend a lot of time with them. Got to do a lot for them, and for that I'm thankful. There's great grandparents, and there's just regular grandparents, but they was great. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget that them doodle bugs under the barn there. I'm gonna show you how you can catch them doodle bugs and check them out and see what they look like on the next, maybe not the next video, it may be, but it's gonna be a video coming up real soon, and I believe you'll enjoy that if you've never seen a doodle bug before. Like this video if you will, subscribe if you ain't already, tell your friends about me, get out and prowl around and check out some old homesteads and whatnot. You don't have to wait on me to get out there with the camera. While it's pretty weather before old winter time gets here, you can get out there and check some out. There's a lot of places all over, and I always ask permission if it's private property, but there's a lot of state-owned places you can go and enjoy yourself and look at some history. This is Justro at Metcalf Mills. I look forward to seeing you real soon.